Hey there, and welcome. So, I want you to forget everything you think you know about those dusty old books from English class. Today, we are diving headfirst into the 19th century's most electrifying, most addictive form of entertainment, the Victorian novel. Seriously, think of it less like homework and way more like the original binge watch.
I mean, have you ever wondered what people did before streaming services, before season finales had the whole world talking? What was that one cultural phenomenon that had everybody hooked, debating theories, and just desperately waiting for the next episode? Well, you're looking at it. It was the novel.
Alright, so here's our game plan. First, we'll look at how this whole new age of storytelling even got started. Then we're going to see how novels became this giant mirror for society with writers like Thackeray. After that, we'll get into the passionate, rebellious voices of the Bronte sisters and see how the novel just kept evolving with thinkers like Eliot and Hardy. And finally, we'll ask the big question: why do these stories still have such a hold on us today?
Okay. Let's set the scene. We're in the Victorian age, which runs roughly from 1832 to 1901. And listen, this wasn't just a time of steam engines and factories. It was a total revolution in storytelling. You had this intense clash between faith and science, tradition and progress, and the novel was right there in the middle of it all. For the middle class, which was just exploding in size, the novel was, well, it was everything. It was the main event. You see, as books got cheaper to print and lending libraries started popping up all over, suddenly everyone had access to stories. This wasn't some niche hobby, you know? This was mass entertainment for a brand new audience that was hungry for stories that felt real.
But what's really wild is how people got these stories. Most novels didn't come out as one big, chunky book. Nope, they were released in monthly installments, kind of like episodes. And this created this amazing feedback loop. An author would drop a chapter, the public would go nuts, and the writer could, and often would, literally tweak the plot based on what fans were loving or hating.
Can you imagine the pressure? It meant every single installment had to end on a cliffhanger. Every chapter had to keep you on the edge of your seat, desperate for the next month's issue. This wasn't just writing. It was a performance, a kind of interactive dance between the writer and a huge, diverse audience that stretched from high society folks all the way down to the household staff.
So, what were these stories actually about? Well, that brings us to our first major movement: novelists who decided to hold a giant mirror up to the world around them. And we're going to start with the master of realism, William Thackeray.
This quote, it's pure Thackeray. The man had this fierce, burning hatred for snobbery, for fakeness, for all the social clining and hypocrisy he saw everywhere. He wasn't trying to write fairy tales with happy endings. He was all about the truth, no matter how messy or uncomfortable it got.
And his masterpiece, Vanity Fair, shows you exactly how he did it. He gives us two heroines. On one hand, you've got sweet Amelia, the gentle, kind product of a wealthy home. And on the other, you've got Becky Sharp. Oh, Becky Sharp is one of the all-time great anti-heroines. She's brilliant, she's ambitious, and she has to fight and claw for every single thing she gets in a society that is determined to keep her down.
So you see what he's doing, right? Thackeray used his novels as a mirror. He was reflecting his readers' world right back at them, showing them all the flaws, the vanity, the things nobody wanted to admit. He wasn't telling them what they wanted to hear. He was showing them who they really were.
But not every writer was looking outward at society. Some of them were looking inward, deep into the wild, passionate, and rebellious territory of the human heart. And this, right here, is where the Bronte sisters came in and just completely changed the game.
The Brontes basically injected the fiery spirit of the Romantic movement directly into the novel. Their work wasn't about polite society or proper manners. Oh no, it was this huge, powerful scream for the individual, for their passions, their feelings, and their right to push back against the rigid rules of their world.
And each sister brought something unique to the table. You have Charlotte, who gave us Jane Eyre, this absolutely groundbreaking story of a woman who demands to be seen as an equal. Then there's Emily, who unleashed the raw, obsessive, almost supernatural love story of Wuthering Heights. And Anne, who people often forget, wrote with this quiet strength and unflinching honesty about a woman's fight for independence.
So if Thackeray's novel was a mirror reflecting society, the Brontes' novel was a window. It was a window that looked directly into the inner life, into the soul of a person. They showed us that the real drama, the biggest stories, weren't happening at fancy parties in London. They were happening inside the human heart.
Now, as the century rolls on, the world just gets more and more complex. And guess what? So does the novel. Writers started to tackle bigger, more intellectual ideas. They weren't just asking what characters do, but digging into the deep, messy reasons why they do it.
And this is where George Eliot comes in. That was the pen name for Marianne Evans, by the way. She was probably the smartest novelist of her time, and her big innovation was to bring a kind of psychological analysis into her stories. She would explore people's motivations with this incredible blend of scientific precision and just deep human empathy.
For her, the novel became a tool for having a serious conversation about morality. Just look at her masterpiece, Middlemarch. It's not just one story, it's this whole web of interconnected lives that paints a portrait of an entire town. It's this profound look at ambition, at failure, and the search for a meaningful life.
Then, as the Victorian era started to fade, the mood of the novel began to get, well, a lot darker. And that brings us to Thomas Hardy. His work is just drenched in this sense of pessimism, this feeling that fate is this huge, crushing force that individuals just can't fight. He wrote obsessively about his home region, this rural world that he could see was vanishing right before his eyes.
The great tragedy in Hardy's books is seeing ordinary people get completely crushed by forces they can't control, whether it's social prejudice, just plain bad luck, or the cold, impersonal march of progress. His characters are often caught between the old agricultural way of life and the harsh new industrial world, and believe me, the results are almost always heartbreaking.
Okay, so we've gone from satirical takedowns of high society to these passionate cries from the heart to deep psychological studies. But look, these are 150-year-old stories. Why on earth should we still care?
Yeah. Let's make this personal for a second. What does the story of some characters named Becky Sharp or Jane Eyre or Tess of the D'Urbervilles have to do with your life, right now, with the shows you binge watch and the stories you love?
The answer? Pretty much everything. Because the Victorians were the ones who first mapped out all these timeless human struggles that are still at the heart of modern storytelling. That character fighting for their own identity? That's Jane Eyre. The ambitious outsider trying to claw their way into a system that's rigged against them? That is Becky Sharp. That struggle to find your place in a world that's changing way too fast? That is the core of almost every single book we've talked about today.
So here's the bottom line. These writers created the blueprint. They took the novel from just being light entertainment and they turned it into a mirror for our society, a window into our souls, and a lab for exploring the deepest questions about what it means to be human.
And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. The next time you get totally hooked on a show about a brilliant anti-hero, or a defiant heroine who won't back down, or just a character struggling against the hand they were dealt, ask yourself, which Victorian character's story are we still telling today? I think the answer just might surprise you.